One of the most confusing things to get a handle on in the world of everything being digital is this idea of container formats and file formats. Everything we create, whether it's through the acquisition process of taking pictures with a digital camera or acquiring video and audio through a camcorder or a digital audio recorder, it all involves the process of creating content and then storing that content digitally as zeros and ones. And the creation of these files is proprietary to the devices and the formats that we're using to record the information and to manipulate it within the software programs we're using. So we have to understand something about how computers and digital devices encode the zeros and ones that make up our graphics, our video, and our audio. And it really can become confusing because there are so many different ways in which that encoding process can be done. Well, let's begin this exploration by talking about container formats. A multimedia container format is pretty much what the name suggests. It's a container, a wrapper, sometimes it's called a wrapper file format, for consolidating individual audio and video bit streams within a single file so that that information can be transported without having to package it in a folder with many different files. So we talked about this in the audio chapter where we discussed audio files often have two channels of audio, left and right, in a stereo mix. And so within an audio file format or a container format, you will have at least two audio bit streams that are then contained within that parent file, known as a container format. Well, the icons that I have listed here on screen show you a handful of some of the most popular container formats that we have today for multimedia. The first one is QuickTime. This is a format developed by Apple. AVI is a similar format. It stands for Audio Video Interleave, and the AVI format was developed by the Microsoft company to support video and audio processing on a Windows-based computer. QuickTime and AVI are very similar. They have different markets, and with the proliferation of Apple-related products out there for multimedia consumption, QuickTime by far is one of the most popular container formats that we have. We also have ch264 and MPEG-4, also known as AVC, and this is an open standard that was created for the consumer electronics industry. So many of the manufacturers of television sets, Blu-ray, DVD players, and recorders, etc., will use ch264/MPEG-4 as the container format for storing and creating audio and video bit streams on optical media or online media for downstream acquisition of movie content, video content, audio content, etc. And then last but not least, we have the MPEG-3 format. We talked about this in the audio chapter. This is the distribution format for compressed audio, primarily for people who want to store music and music files on portable digital devices. So these are not all of the container formats, but these certainly are probably four that you ought to become familiar with. Let's take a snapshot now and go into one of these container formats. So we have the container. In this particular case, we're going to look at Apple QuickTime. And under the Apple QuickTime standard, these are just a few of the supported file formats that can be contained by a QuickTime wrapper. And these are divided into three categories. We have the video formats on the left, the audio formats in the middle, and the graphic file formats on the right. And these are long lists. I'm not going to take the time to go through these, but you get the idea here that there are many different types of files that QuickTime will recognize, be able to process, and be able to display back to someone consuming video on their computer or offline in the QuickTime container format. The Apple QuickTime multimedia player supports all of these formats as well. So if you're using that player to interact with multimedia content, as long as the content was encoded using one of these standard file formats, then chances are pretty good that you'll be able to view it. And we've all had that awkward experience of trying to open up a multimedia file and not being able to play it. And there's usually one of two reasons. One is the file could just simply be corrupted. It might not have been exported correctly. But one of the more common reasons is it may not be supported by the multimedia player or software that you're using. So it's really important to understand the container formats and which file formats they support. Otherwise, you may find yourself not really exporting your project in the most efficient way possible for the largest number of multimedia consumers out there. Well, I'm going to jump over to a software program called MPEG Streamclip. This is available as a free download online and for both Windows and for Mac computers. So it's a cross-platform application designed to transcode and compress audio, video, and graphic file formats into any other number of file formats. If I go up to my file menu, I can choose to export the video that I have loaded into the window as a QuickTime movie. I can export it in the digital video file format as an AVI file or as an MPEG-4 just by choosing one of these four options. I'm going to go ahead and select the QuickTime movie option, and this will bring up a properties window in which I will define precisely how this program is to encode my video and to wrap it into the QuickTime container format. The very first menu option I have is labeled compression, and from this long list I can choose a specific video codec, but the codec is the actual algorithm that the software will use to encode the video and the audio information into bit streams within the container format. And I have again a long list of potential codecs to choose from, and when you're just getting started this is going to look really confusing, but for the most part there's a handful of really common formats that are out there. For instance, right now I'm going to go ahead and choose ch12. This too is related to the MPEG-4 standard, so if I was uploading this video to YouTube or Vimeo, I would choose ch264 as the codec within the QuickTime wrapper to encode this video. I have a quality slider here, and I can choose to go with a lower quality setting, which will result in a smaller file size, or I can maximize the quality at 100%, but just realize that that's also going to create a larger file. And then down here in the frame size window, I can choose to leave my video in its native file format, which is in this case, this was created as a true HD video program, so the native file format is 1920 by 1080 pixels, is unscaled. So if I leave this here, the compression will be faster because this program won't have to actually downsample or downscale the project to a lower resolution. But very often if I was exporting this for the web to YouTube, for example, I might want to change this to 720p. It would result in a smaller frame size, but it would also result in a smaller file, allowing the video probably to play a little bit better, especially for people who have a low bandwidth internet connection. For right now I'm going to leave it at 1920 by 1080 just because I don't want to take the extra time to convert it to 720p. Over here on the right I have the option to deinterlace the video, or I can leave it interlaced. I'll go ahead and deinterlace it, and I have some other options down here that I'm pretty much going to ignore. You don't have to be an expert at understanding what all of this jargon is, but there are some basic things that you have to think about when you decide to export video into a different codec or into a different format. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Make Movie option, and we'll store it in this folder. We'll replace the one that I did earlier. And rather than exporting the entire video, I've set an in and out point in my timeline so that I can do a test export rather than taking the time to transcode the entire 16-minute video project, which would probably take about an hour or more. I'm going to do a small sample of that, and in the upper right hand corner I have a progress bar that lets me know how much longer I have to wait for the encoding to take place. So I'm up to 7%, and for the sake of time I'll do an edit here in a second and we'll jump to the finished product. Alright, so MPEG Streamclip has completed the exporting of this video as I've set the in and out point down here below, and if I go over to my Finder window, here's a thumbnail of the actual .mov file. So QuickTime uses the MOV extension as an indicator that this is indeed a QuickTime wrapper. AVI uses a .avi extension, so learning about what these file extensions are can sort of help you keep track of which container format you happen to be working in. And if I play this, you'll see a portion. Alright, the video is stuttering a little bit again because I'm doing the screen recording, but it gives you an idea of how we were able to take a video project and export it as a QuickTime movie using our MPEG stream clip utility.